Hey everybody, this is Mark from Circle the Dark Mother. Today I'm going to talk about Adam, Lilith, Eve, and Samael. And this could be a controversial topic. Definitely will be for Christians, probably Jewish people and Muslims, but it'll also be controversial for some in the spiritual community. So I just wanted to put that out there before I get started. So, archetypes. We usually think of Adam, Eve, Lilith, and Samael as independent entities, which they are. But what if we look at them in a different way, in a way that lets us see them as archetypical aspects of all of us, being humans at this point, maybe others? Most people in Western culture know the biblical story of Adam and Eve, reported to be the first man and woman. Anyone in the occult community has also probably heard the stories of Lilith and Samael. The myths and stories of these four figures are many when you explore Jewish midrash, which are extra biblical texts, and the Gnostic Gospels. They are portrayed as spiritual entities, and with Adam and Eve, beings that take physical form. The fact we must take into account is that Gnosticism and Kabbalah are at their core about consciousness. This doesn't diminish entities being individuals, but it also includes the idea of spiritual archetypes that represent and embody more than just the entity themselves. In this video, we will explore the archetypical meaning of these four figures, how they interact, and how they are part of all of us. So first, Adam and Eve. In the second chapter of Genesis, Adam is said to be the first human created. And hold on to that thought because we'll address alternatives later in the video. In the biblical story, Adam is created in a place called the Garden of Eden, where God formed him out of the dust of the ground and breathed life into him. Later, God decides that Adam shouldn't be alone, so he puts Adam to sleep, removes a rib, and creates Eve, the first woman. Again, hold on to that thought because we'll also address alternatives to this. It is important to note that the English translation of rib is actually incorrect. The original Hebrew indicates that Eve was taken from Adam's side, being a part of him, not just a random rib. So she's not really like an afterthought. She is a fully realized part of him that is brought forward. Adam's name in Hebrew consists of the letters Aleph, Dalet, Mem. Hebrew is multidimensional, and so each letter has a meaning. Aleph means spirit, usually human spirit, but can also, at its base meaning, is beast of the field. Dalet means door, and Mem means water or blood. So his name actually means spirit in the blood, as the first corporeal aspect of deity. Eve's name in Hebrew is actually Hava, which means source of all life, and she is said to be the mother of all humanity. From there, you are probably familiar with the story of the quote apple, unquote, and their fall from grace. Now, Gnostics don't believe it was an apple, it wasn't actually physical fruit, and it wasn't really a fall from grace. It was the needed push for them to individuate. But that's not the point of this. So let's move on. So Lilith and Samael. Lilith is barely mentioned in the biblical texts, but is heavily portrayed in the Jewish Midrash and Kabbalistic texts. Also, she is mentioned in Gnostic texts, but she's called the first Eve. She is called the first wife of Adam, a demon, and the sometimes consort of God Most High. She's complicated. In Genesis 1 or chapter 1, it says that a man and a woman were created in the image of God, male and female, he created them, which really should be they created them because it's God is both male and female, but English is very male female oriented when it comes to pronouns. So this is confusing since Genesis 2 says that Adam is created and Eve is created later. The rabbis wrote in the Midrash that this first woman created at the same time as Adam. So Eve is not the first woman, and Adam is not the first human. He's co-created with Lilith. And they say that Lilith rebelled, said the secret name of God, and flew out of Eden. She was then replaced with Eve. However, Lilith was the first woman created at the same time as Adam, as I said. Samael is considered an archangel, not a demon, contrary to popular belief. In the original text, he is called an archangel and one of the heavenly host. His name means the venom of God and is often associated with the Satan, the accuser, which is a title, not a name. If you read the book of Job, it talks about the Satan, not Satan, but the Satan in the throne room of God, and he's basically working for God. It's a role. And there's many Satans. Samael is certainly one of them. Lilith has been called a Satan, but really any entity that is there to accuse, test, and push at humanity can have that title. In some stories, Samael is pre-existing, and in others, he is removed from Lilith's side as her masculine side, just as Eve is removed as Adam's feminine side. In either case, they are considered consorts that bring chaos into the world. Their story goes far beyond the demonic caricature that modern belief has created. They are necessary to creation, just as Adam and Eve, and in fact, in some ways, more necessary because they are the push to enlightenment. So, a brief intro to Kabbalah. At this point, you may be wondering where this video is going. Bear with me because I will get to the point. But there is some setup that needs to be covered first. If you're already familiar with these ideas, I apologize for dragging it out, but I want everyone to be able to consume what I post, no matter what their background. Kabbalah is the mystical Gnostic tradition of Judaism that starts in Mesopotamia, grows, and evolves into what is used today by many occult traditions. Kabbalah literally means tradition and giving, but is a mystical journey into consciousness and creation. The Tree of Life is a central aspect of modern Kabbalah, consisting of 10 spheres that contain different levels of consciousness represented by names and personalities of deity. This glyph doesn't represent anything physical, but instead is relationships of consciousness. In Kabbalah, the right pillar of the tree is mercy, the left is severity or restriction, and the middle is compassion. None of these are bad or are mean, but they're polarities. And the reason I say this is in English, the word severity sounds nasty, but it's not. It's restriction, where mercy is unbridled grace. And it sounds like that's a good thing, but we need the restriction, or everything would just be sucked back up into what is God or the light kingdom or whatever you want to call it. So there is no differentiation. So we need both. And then compassion is that middle ground, that balance. Compassion, being the middle path, is what we need for our enlightenment and liberation. The tree of life was also mentioned in Genesis as a physical tree that brought eternal life. And they were told they couldn't eat of it once they ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil because they would live forever. And this is a symbol of order. In parallel to the tree of life, there is the tree of shadows or tree of knowledge of good and evil. This tree consists of 10 husks that contain the shadow of the levels of consciousness represented by names and personalities. This tree is also mentioned in Genesis as the tree they should not eat of. It is chaos, and it is what, when they do eat of it, they get cast out. So, what's the point? As mentioned in previous slides, these four figures are more than individual entities, but are also the archetypes of human consciousness. In Gnostic Kabbalah, Adam is the embodiment of merciful male consciousness. He is the ordered masculine archetype. Eve is the embodiment of merciful female consciousness. She is the ordered feminine archetype. Lilith is the embodiment of severe female consciousness. She is the chaotic female archetype. And Samael is the embodiment of the severe male consciousness. He is the chaotic male archetype. In Gnosticism, we, as humans, need to be the balance of all four of these archetypes. For enlightenment and liberation, we must be compassionate, the compassionate human one, not just a Homo sapiens, our genus and species, but instead a human. The fully realized balance of order, chaos, male and female consciousness. And understand this isn't about our body, our plumbing, our sex, or our sexuality. This is about our consciousness. This balancing of our aspects is the true path to enlightenment. We do this through meditation, study, and other practices that explore our consciousness and help us to find the shadows within that need uplifted and healed. It is not a one-time event, but a process that may even take multiple lifetimes. So, with that being said, I know one of the questions is, so what about Yeshua? And the point of this is, how do these ideas relate to Christianity and Jesus? I do want to say as a note that this video is not to diminish anyone's belief, whether Christian or non-Christian. This is a discussion from Gnostic Kabbalistic tradition on the archetypes and consciousness of humanity. In Gnosticism, Jesus is called Yeshua because that would have been his name in Aramaic, which is the language he spoke. Jesus is actually an English version of his Greek name that had been translated from Hebrew, and that's how we get to Jesus. But there's no J sound in Hebrew or Aramaic, so he wouldn't have been called Jesus. He was called Yeshua or Yeshua. We also can't discuss this topic without covering the figure of Mary Magdalene. In the Gnostic Gospels, Magdalene is the disciple of the disciples, the most inner student, and considered the embodiment of female deity. She is the divine bride to Yeshua's divine son. Mystically, they are not unique, but instead the first of enlightened humanity within their paradigm. And what I mean by paradigm is this is within their culture and religion. There are others in other traditions that go back for centuries that do the same thing. But I'm talking about Gnosticism and Kabbalah here because that's my primary path. Gnostic mythology says that Yeshua is the blending of Adam and Samael. This comes from his own words stating that he is the second Adam. It is believed by Gnostics that when he encountered the Satan in the desert during his temptation, he balanced his merciful and severe sides into a true human male. Magdalene is said to have been the reincarnation of Eve, who during the trials of her life encounters the spirit of Lilith. Lilith protects her and merges with her. In her enlightenment, she becomes the balance of mercy and severity in female form. Together, Yeshua and Magdalene are considered the joining of son and bride, creating a new humanity that is fully realized and enlightened. This is a work of magic that has occurred in other cultures and other times to aid humanity on our path. It is one story of full liberation through enlightenment. Now, I know sometimes people ask about sources, and I wrote a lot of this down just from my knowledge, but there are sources to this. So, first of all, you read the New Testament, you do see that Jesus calls himself, or Yeshua calls himself, the first Adam, or the second Adam, I'm sorry. Um, in the Torah, or in the book of Genesis, it does talk about Adam and Eve and the trees and all this stuff. And then when you read Zohar and other Kabbalistic materials, it talks about the whole idea of these archetypes. It does not speak of Magdalene and Yeshua because it was written from a Jewish perspective, but it does talk about the son and the bride. It does talk about Lilith and Samael. It does talk about Adam and Eve. And then in the Gnostic Gospels and in Gnostic myths, we get the stories of, Lilith being called the first Eve, of the idea of the son and the bride, which is also Kabbalistic, but it's Logos and Sophia in Greek, the word and the wisdom, which is the male and female coming together. So this comes from all of these different sources brought into one idea. The idea of the four archetypes being part of us also comes from the tradition that I came from. So I didn't make this up. This was something that we were taught as part of that tradition coming out of these texts that I've talked about. Hopefully that was helpful. And in the comments, let me know what you thought. And if you would like to have other videos like this or other topics, I've got a backlog of videos and topics, but I'll always pull something up if I think it's interesting and I know anything about it. If I don't, I'm not going to comment because I'm not going to post on it because if I don't know it, I'm not going to say something that I haven't learned. Okay, take care. Thank you.